Coach B, thanks for joining us today.
Jason, thank you for having me. Happy Monday. Here we are in the midst of fall and autumn. Couple of marathon majors on the horizon, and looking forward to catching up with you since we last connected in Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah, we had a great time actually being roommates at the Endeavor Run retreat last month. That was good. We're still talking after being roommates, so I guess it went all right.
It did. It did. Good times for sure. Lots of laughs.
Yeah, well, I had such a great time hanging out with you and talking with you about all things running over the course of the retreat that I wanted to have this conversation about coaching. And I think it's going to be really interesting from both what makes a good coach? How do you find a coach? But also, if you are looking for a coach, how can you be the best runner you can be in that coaching relationship? So I thought it might be interesting to start with some context on who you are and how you came to being a coach, because you came to this profession a little bit later in life, and I think your journey really highlights your passion for the sport and for the job itself.
Thank you. Let's see here. My primary profession, guess we can say growing up, was in the hospitality business. So, all things people. I managed hotels in the Bay Area for 3 decades. Loved it. It really allowed me to take in consideration people's expectations, being proactive, being thoughtful, being able to connect, being able to listen. And my last stint, I actually kind of retired from the business right before the pandemic. And I started running, as you mentioned, a little bit later in life, early 40s. And you know how welcoming the running community is. So after my first timed event, it wasn't an individual running event, it was actually a marathon relay with three other friends. And I was the least experienced runner in that group. It was in Oakland, California. It was the Oakland Running Festival in 2011, I believe, and I had a blast. I took the toughest route, meaning the most hills, unknowingly. It was the shortest distance, so I volunteered for that, but didn't realize it was going to be full of hills. But after that, Jason, I mean, crossing the finish line, the team camaraderie, the spirit out there on the course, um, I felt like it was the Olympics for me. I was that like just all in. Um, Being active all of my life, a baseball player growing up, always enjoyed getting into the gym, but running was just different. I loved the simplicity of it, just being able to get outdoors in a pair of shoes. You can do it with an accountability buddy, or you can go it alone and listen to your own thoughts. And I started a running community that's now grown to a running club of about 1,000 people here in the Bay Area called Too Legit Fitness. I'm very proud of that. And the friendships that I've been able to cultivate through my love of running have been profound. Some of my closest friends, just by my way of loving to get outdoors and put one friend in front of the other, has allowed our friendship to grow and to flourish. The same thing with our mutual friend, Coach Matt Fitzgerald. So it's been the gift that keeps on giving. Um, and I knew that I was at my happiest point, Coach Jason, when it had anything to do with social fitness. And I couldn't silence that voice any longer. And it made me think, am I at a stage where I want to cross over and be Coach B full time? So, with that said, I elected to invest in self and looked at some certification bodies. And one of them was Road Runners Clubs of America, RRCA. Another one was USA Track and Field. Went through both of those, got my certifications, and then it allowed me to feel a bit more like, okay, now I've arrived and I can speak from a point of insight. And the rest has been just history. I've really enjoyed all aspects of coaching. It's allowed me to travel the country in part of coaching as well, and just being an active participant, navigating our way through the pandemic. And I'm sure we can talk a little bit through some of those other aspects of being a coach and the view of things through the athlete's eyes as well.
I think from my perspective, I certainly look at your past professional experience in the hospitality industry as likely one of the big reasons why you're such a successful coach, because like you said, it gave you these skills of really listening to people and communicating and understanding where people were, where they're coming from, so that you can hopefully help them have the experience that they want to experience. It's like, are we talking about the hospitality industry right now, or coaching runners? And it's very
Right.
similar. And I
I
think
agree.
that is such a big determinant of success in coaching. We can go into that a little bit more. The other thing that you said that really resonated with me was the simplicity of running. And, even though I think you need a little bit more than a pair of shoes to go for a run, Coach B, I certainly saw you in shorts. I'd encourage you to keep wearing those shorts when you go running, not just shoes. The element of simplicity with the sport is something that I fell in love with at the very beginning, and it just is such a magnet to me. It draws me to the sport in a way that I actually have some trouble, really putting into words, because I'm just drawn to that level of simplicity. Um, I've always heard this line that does resonate with me, that coaching is an art and a science. And I'd love for you to, with that in mind, talk about what you think makes a good running coach.
Excellent question. Um, what I find myself doing, Coach Jason, is going back to people who've had a profound impact in my life, whether they be aunts, uncles, grandparents, parents, former athletic coaches, or teachers. All those individuals in various ways have pivotal, profound impact on our lives as we grow up and shape us. Um, and for me, the individuals that challenged me, the individuals that were able to see the potential before I could, um, the coaches or individuals who were effective and clear and concise communicators, being able to kind of put it out there and not kind of beat around the bush, really worked well for me. I think it's important to be organized and to be where you say you're going to be. So if it's time to show up somewhere and um, get through the work lesson or the work related objective or the workout of the day, that's important. So having expectations and being able to execute from start to finish is important. And then being able to connect and understand the athlete's why. Again, that's where the ability to listen, and it's not the coach's way, or our own personal agenda, but understanding where the athlete is at. And sometimes it's not always about the X's and O's and executing the actual workout. There can be things that are going on in the background that the coach has to be able to listen and to be able to pick up on, in work life balance, anxiety, stress management, maybe some high points in the athlete's um, athletic career or career in general, being able to pick up on those nuggets and use it as means to kind of steer the journey, while being able to be flexible. And when we talk about schedules and task and time management, sometimes we can get fixated on, you know, X, Y, and Z. But being able to be flexible and nimble, sometimes weather will dictate, sometimes injury and fatigue will dictate that. Sometimes the mood of the athlete will dictate that. But ultimately, our role as a coach is to keep the athlete engaged and moving forward where we're stringing along consistency. And yes, there are a lot of uh, um, philosophies as it relates to coaching principles. But ultimately, we're taking the athlete and fine tuning their ability to be consistent, where they're flexing on intensity, balance with rest and recovery, but keeping them motivated through the process while still having a clear, measurable objective. And I think those are some key components to a good coach. Like if I were to prioritize in one, two, and three, being able to listen is super important. Um, Clear and concise communication, and your ability to motivate the athlete when some days they may not just be feeling it, either due to fatigue, or working with those athletes that may be a bit overzealous, those type A personalities that are overachievers that want to keep going and going and going. Being able to strike a chord and find the happy balance when we're always focused on the bigger picture, I think those three components make for a successful coach and athlete relationship.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you framed it as the coach athlete relationship, because that's really what it is. And, my thought on this is that I think rigidity is probably one of the traits that will undermine a lot of coaches, because like you said, you need to be able to be flexible and really think about what the athlete both wants and needs. And it's almost this element of being a flexible problem solver. It doesn't matter what your agenda is or the workout that you're so proud of as a coach that you planned for the day. Maybe that's not going to happen today. And
Yeah.
it's not about the workout, it's about the athlete. And I find that to be really helpful as we think about the type of person that makes a good coach is the type of person who loves the sport so much that they're willing to modify it in any way possible for the athlete's benefit so that they can continue on and keep going after whatever goal that they might have. You did mention some coaching certifications. Can you talk a little bit about your experience with those? Whether you recommend other coaches go for a certain certification? Is one enough? Should you get two? You could certainly go down the rabbit hole and start getting certified from every governing body that exists out there. So is one enough? How do you think about all that?
Excellent question. The first entity that I got my certification through was Roadrunners Club of America. Um, Highly respected, time tested, and I think if I were to recommend, absolutely without question. Um, the why behind that, the I guess head trainer, Randy A, um, is I mean, he's been doing this for a long time. Now they've morphed due to the pandemic, where you're able to get that coaching certification in, I believe, a 2 or 3 day format, online and virtual. Where before it was predominantly all in person, which I really enjoy personally. If I had a choice to go through coaching certification virtually or in person, I would always choose the in person component. Do I think something is lost in the rollout of the curriculum? Uh, I do, from the interaction that you're having with your fellow classmates. And when I went through my certification in 2017, 2018, what I remember the most is those sidebar conversations, the problem solving, the training philosophy, sharing our own personal journeys, the rapport building, the fellowship. That kind of stuff was priceless, and some of those people I'm still very close to this day. And it's a little tougher to get that level of connection when it's through a virtual format. Now, a lot of coaching entities are going online, and I understand that. I also, let's see, working with USA Track and Field as a certified race official. I went through that, and a USA certified track coach. I've en- I enjoyed that experience. Again, that was an in-person experience. As part of the Pacific Association, I think the largest um, group within USA Track and Field is the Pacific West Coast region. Great work, and I've been very fortunate to get out and coach, referee some Pac-12 track events, which is really really cool. I mean, watch Stanford and SC and Cal, etc. So that level of D1 athlete has been really really cool. Um, One that I would highly recommend that will be rolling out here in the next couple of months would be 80/20 endurance with Coach Matt Fitzgerald and his team. They're rolling out an online curriculum, which one of the most popular running and triathlon related, and I think just endurance sports in general. 80/20 endurance training philosophy, really focus on balancing intensity and effort, has been I know that I've seen behind the scenes, and that will be rolled out I think before year end. So, um, but the two that I've gone through have loved because of the in person component. And as I mentioned earlier, I know that a lot of entities are rolling those out virtually via Zoom and other formats. And I think having a couple of different points of view, perspectives, helps the coach um, be more well rounded. Because I know we're talking about running and endurance and, all the things in between, but having different points of perspective, I think ultimately helps the coach and gives the athlete a little bit more variety and the depth of knowledge, which is good. So those are a few. Another would be that I would consider, I think, Jack Daniels, the VDOT, is something that I'm certainly contemplating. And I love to read. I follow you, your online content, the educational component from all your YouTube videos, your podcast series, are one of the best in the United States, worldwide, in my opinion. Not just saying that because I know you, but because you have helped myself and so many other athletes because of your approach, your grasp on the subject matter, your relatability, and it can apply to the everyday runner, the blue collar runner, the couch to 5K, or that individual who's run Boston and has completed the marathon major circuit and everyone in between. So, thank you for sharing your love of running, because that is a way to help coaches depending on where they are in their own coaching journey, just by expanding the mind, listening to quality, creative um, podcast that have their finger on the pulse as it relates to the latest and greatest, as it relates to coaching philosophy, wins and losses, and everything in between.
I will say that when I was first becoming a coach, sort of in that 2010, 2011 time period, I wish there were more running podcasts that I could have listened to, because it's just such an incredible opportunity to learn more
For
about the
sure.
sport in such a way that is just so effective, because you can listen to an individual podcast episode about a very niche topic with two brilliant people and just hear them talk about it from so many different angles. I think it's an incredible resource to any aspiring coach. And when it comes to those individual certifications, I don't particularly feel very ideological about any of them. I think RRCA, USA Track and Field, the VDOT program. I know Matt is working on his 80/20 training certification. I think all of those are really fantastic. But I like the direction you took your answer, in that you also talked about some of the a little bit more informal education that you've done on the side with reading books and listening to podcasts, because initially that was my whole introduction to the actual training theory and physiology and biomechanics and all of the more niche topics that are in the sport of running that coaches have to understand. And if I kind of showed you my library of running books, you might call the authorities. It's a little bit
Yeah,
strange
I've
how
seen
many
it.
running
I've
books.
seen it on, yeah, through some of your YouTube content, and your uh, video podcast. So very impressive. And where you've shared some of your favorite titles, or you've had those authors on to explain and share some of those fantastic takeaways. And again, it's a way for you in the midst of a workout, on a long run, while driving, to learn on the fly. Incredibly valuable and very helpful.
Yeah, and I always think that's the first step. So, one of the questions I wanted to talk about with you was, if someone's thinking about becoming a coach themselves, what does that process look like? What should they start with? How should they go about becoming a coach? And, my thought on this is that start by learning as much as you can. And I think the very fundamental building blocks can be done just by reading a lot of books, maybe listening to podcasts. Otherwise, a little bit of self taught education can really go a long way. And there are so many amazing running books out there where, as soon as you start reading three, four, five, six, seven training books where you're actually learning about the physiology behind training, I think it's at that point that you really start connecting the dots. And it doesn't matter if you're reading Matt Fitzgerald or Jack Daniels or any other author. Once you start getting to 4 or 5 books into the same subject, you really start seeing the similarities. And then you also, which I think is even more interesting, you start to see the little areas where coaches disagree on things. And you really start to understand that a lot of the times it's almost a disagreement that doesn't really matter too much. It's an element of style. It's where the art of coaching comes in. Because at this point, I think we have a pretty good, firm handle on the science of training, how distance runners should generally go about their training. And then a lot of the differences are in style, approach, and personalization to the individual athlete. But I cannot get behind this any more than to say, yes, read a bunch of running books, really start doing a lot of that self education for yourself, because it can be enormously helpful in getting you to understand the sport. Something I say on this podcast all the time is knowledge is a competitive advantage, and it'll certainly help you make wiser decisions about your own training. But if you want to be making wise decisions for other people's training, it really comes in handy to have a good firm grasp on some of the best running books out there.
Yeah. It's essential, Coach Chase. I mean, we yeah, it is essential. We have to have a very good understanding of the I guess you can say the X's and O's, the core fundamentals of growing somebody's endurance, speed, and everything else in between. Why? There's inherent risk when you were telling somebody to get out and go run fast and run long, to jump, to move left, right, lateral, all that other stuff. We're impacting somebody's health, so you have to understand the mental aspect, the ability to motivate, but also the physiological component as well. And we want to keep people active, happy, and healthy. And if, as a coach, we're prescribing too much intensity too soon, we're going to have athletes that are going to be on the sideline. And the last thing we want is, because of the training load not being completely in sync with where the athlete is at, that we're not able to string along training days of consistency. So we want to avoid that. And let's see, how else can I speak further to that point?
Well, I was going to ask you a little bit of a different question. It just popped into my head. What is your thoughts on the role of intuition in coaching? Because this was something that our friend, mutual friend Matt Fitzgerald, was talking about at Endeavor Run with Ben Rosario, the coach of Northern Arizona Elite, the team that he trained with for, I think, about 6 or 8 weeks before his PR marathon. And he said that he just had this intuitive grasp of training and what would work for athletes. And that's really hard to defend. As you're a coach, you're talking about the importance of education and some of these certifications so that we're all talking the same language as coaches. But on the same side, I'm someone who grew up with the sport of running, high school, college. I've been fully enmeshed in the sport since I was 14 years old. I do feel like I have a bit of this intuitive grasp on the what works, what doesn't work, how different workouts will make athletes feel, so that if I'm planning a weekly training schedule, I know how they're going to feel after a hard day's work. I know how they're going to feel the day before and what they should be doing the day before to help prime themselves for that harder workout. And that's really hard to put into words. And so I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on just this intuitive role that some coaches have that they deploy in their coaching practice.
I think that's very valid. But I think that is cultivated, uh, Coach Jason, over time, um, because it's based on real life experience. As you or we as coaches, if we've um, been coaching for a while and we've worked with several different athletes at different levels, different stages, different abilities, through injury and through PRs, through off seasons, there's an emotional um, baseline that you can start to just see some trends and just feel it. where you referenced earlier in our conversation the coach's ability to modify workouts um, in the athlete's best interest, or you can sense where an athlete is at emotionally with maybe other things going on in their life, where family matters, work matters, um, not being where they would like to in regards to peaking before a goal race. Being able to sense all those, it may not all be X's and O's built in on their training calendar, but being able to feel that and sense maybe we need to push, maybe we need to pull back, maybe we need just to mix it up. A coach with experience, with a nice little body of work from previous experience, that intuition kind of bubbles to the surface. And I think that does give a more seasoned coach the ability with confidence to kind of trust their gut. And even if it's just to ask another question or two or three and listen a little bit longer, because you can feel when there's a bit of a disconnect with the athlete, or the athlete is maybe not performing based on previous workout activity or previous race results. Um, and that sometimes progress isn't always moving this way, not moving linearly. It's sometimes you um, could, there could be some addition by subtraction. We could have a workup that's just really sucked, that was really tough, but there are a lot of lessons that can be learned in that. And having some good intuition and being able to feel, being able to glean and extract those um, the good out of a tough workout and being able to connect that with the athlete, I think can set us up for future successes. That there's always opportunity to learn something, even when it may not be the best initial workout experience.
That sort of reminds me of the line that runners ought to have endless optimism, but a very short memory. So they're
Yeah,
always thinking about the silver linings of any bad race or workout, but they have a very short memory on the bad race or workout. They don't let it hold them back and
yeah,
stop them. And I
yeah,
think that's a kind of an important way to go about your running so that you're always pulling those little actionable insights from a bad workout or a failed long run or whatever it might be. And, I have a good example of this, sort of like insight through experience over time. I just had one of my coaching clients last week was emailing me, and things weren't going great in his training. He kind of had a tough week, but he was being his own cheerleader and he was excited about, kind of re-upping and attacking the next week of training. And I just had this really bad feeling about things because he had a workout that was too fast. He also did his long run too fast. He also started this new job and it was a very stressful week for him, a lot of extra fatigue from that. And he had a little bit of a niggly plantar fascia where his foot was bothering him. And I said, you know what? This is 4 red flags. Let's take 2 or 3 really easy days. Let's let the body just kind of reset. Let's get back to neutral. I'm not using any fancy coaching terms right now. I'm just saying let's rest a little bit. And then we can get back into your normal schedule. But there's too much going on right now for me to be really confident about you giving your training 100%. We've overreached a little bit. You've got things going on in your life. You've got a niggle. Let's just chill out a little bit. Your fitness is not going to deteriorate in a couple days just by doing some shorter, easier runs. And you're going to be a much better runner in moving forward from that. And I think that's maybe a real world example of what we were
yeah.
just
It's an
talking
excellent
about.
example. Yeah, because again, that's your intuition. I mean, you're able to feel and see those red flags, because prior experience, being in tune and in sync with the athlete, and thinking, okay, if we push a little bit more here, we can find ourselves taking 2 or 3 steps backwards, and we don't want to do that. So being able to communicate, hey, let's just pump the brakes here a bit. Still a lot of time on the calendar. Rome wasn't built in a day. May have prevented, likely, that plantar fasciitis to kind of flare up and be chronic and then impact subsequent weeks and months of training. Good job,
Yeah.
Coach
So,
Jason.
well, thanks, Coach B. Yeah, and I think it's that kind of of foresight that only experience will get you. So if you're looking to become a coach, I think it's always great to learn more about the sport, but also get involved in the sport, be immersed in the sport, really get obsessed with the sport. Because if you love it, if you have that intrinsic motivation to be a part of the sport, to help others excel in the sport, you're going to be an unstoppable individual when it comes to you being a coach.
I could not have said that better. I mean, that's one thing that we both know. You have to love it. You have to love it because it's not going to, in many cases, make you a millionaire. Where like I don't have to work. Y- you have to love the craft. You have to enjoy, in some cases, putting yourself in the athlete's shoes and asking yourself, what would motivate me with as busy as I am with my work schedule, with my life obligations, to find the time to get in, knock out 50 to 60 miles, in some cases getting in 2 a days, running before work or running after work, incorporating some level of strength work while balancing everything else. Um, there's an art. So the coach's ability to again be in sync with the athlete on why are we doing this? What is the motivation? Being able to, in some cases, visualize taking the athlete to that Chicago Marathon finish line, where you can say, hey, can you see that medal being put around your neck? Can you look down at your watch and see what that time is going to be? Um, where the athlete can feel it so it can help offset those days when they feel like they have the weight of the world on top of them. And maybe it is a day where, you know what, let's make it a rest day or active recovery day, maybe giving the athlete a bit of a break and help them work their way through where they don't think that I'm losing so much momentum here that I'm going to lose fitness. Staying present with the athlete, keeping them focused on the bigger picture, um, and staying engaged in the training, and that fine balance of getting enough work, because ultimately, if we're chasing finish times and growing distance, it's going to be much tougher to do so if the athlete and coach are not getting in the physical work. That has to happen. You can't always think, oh, you know what? I want to be faster. And then you're faster. You have to make the time to put the work in. And that's the message that we as coaches try to stress to the athlete. And we want to enjoy putting in the work as much as possible without it feeling like work. We want to have fun in the process. You can have fun and run. You can have fun and get through a training block. Um, and I think good coaches, informed coaches, enthusiastic coaches that enjoy working with people are the coaches that are, in most cases, the most successful because they get the most out of the athlete. And yes, it's important to be optimistic and be rah rah, but also being real with the athlete when there may be a gap in expectations, when that athlete, is probably a year or two away from being able to BQ, but maybe they're just getting to the half marathon distance and feel that they want to, you know, take on a marathon, not a full marathon, a marathon, um, and BQ. And if we need more time in the training process for that athlete to mature and gain their cardio endurance, and a coach being able to say, it is going to be in your future, but this calendar year it's not likely. I think it's important that athletes will appreciate that level of direct, frank conversation to kind of reshape the level of training and look more at a macro perspective, the bigger picture.
Yeah, you know what? I've always thought too that a big part of a healthy coach athlete relationship is that the level of communication and how well they get along, their ability to the coach to motivate the athlete, and a lot of that has to do with just their personalities meshing a little bit because there's so many different types of coaches out there. There's hands-off coaches, there are helicopter coaches, there are drill sergeant coaches, and everyone in between. And I was going to ask you what you think someone should look for when they are hiring a coach. And I think after the basics, after the certification after someone who's demonstrated that they actually have a firm understanding of the training principles and the philosophy behind distance running. But after that, it's primarily, do you vibe well with the coach? Do you guys get
Yes.
along? You know, is it someone that you can envision yourself talking to on a regular basis? Because you could hire the smartest coach on the planet, but if you guys just don't really get along, it's going to be really difficult for you to have a productive relationship. So I'm curious your thoughts on just this perspective that you kind of have to like your coach and vice versa, and have that productive relationship where you just get along a little bit.
Yeah, it's important. It is the kind of the secret sauce. One, the ability to articulate goals, understanding where the athlete has been, and of course, understanding the coach's work history as well. Sometimes that coach may come onto the athlete's radar by way of referral, so the athlete has some insight to the level of consistency, working relationship with someone that the athlete knows, which is huge. But in some cases, athletes are being referred to us through they may see social media ads or follow us or be recommended through other means, and it's a courting process. But as you mentioned, kind of getting through those initial formalities, there has to be a level of, do I feel this individual do I feel comfortable in just opening up? Do I feel comfortable can I will I work hard? Um, and not that you don't want to disappoint the coach, but are they pulling a little extra out of you? Can you see and feel that in the initial conversation or conversations? um, do we feel that the coach is asking good questions and listening to us and being able to draw out some measurables, which is important because it can't be, well, just come out and run and you ran faster. So being able to establish some baselines in that initial those few conversations is important. Is there a level of trust, which is 100% essential? Um, and do we feel that this coach will be able to help us when we are not at our best? Maybe through injury, which happens from time to time, or maybe as life is happening around the athlete. Is this somebody that I feel can be steady, stable, and give me a platform and a space to have something that is still keeping me motivated and engaged, that I feel good about, where there may be some adversity happening on the periphery? And if you're able to answer yes as an athlete when you're contemplating hiring a coach, this is a pretty good bet. Um, and you'll know early if it just seems a little off, if there is not much of a connection. And if that's the case, just it's okay to keep on looking. And some coaches we're doing the same thing as well. We want to see some of those same um, things in an athlete because we know the importance on having a connection. Um, and ultimately, the proof is in the pudding once we get started on the training journey. Sometimes we have athletes that are on it, knocking out all the workouts. And sometimes we have athletes that will kind of go off the radar, so to speak, don't communicate that often, and maybe knocking out all the workouts, or off the radar and there's a complete disconnect. And we work with those unique situations as they happen. Um, but if we can sense the level of compatibility, and sometimes that is intuitive, and it just sets coach and athlete up for future success. And that's what we all want. We want what's best for the athlete, and that's someone that's healthy and making steady progress and growing and learning about the sport as well. um, and we've probably both had examples where some of our athletes have been inspired through having success on our coaching watch that's compelled them to take the leap and become coaches themselves, which is really cool.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that you said that I want to highlight that I thought is really special is the fact that your coach should motivate you in a way that you don't want to disappoint them. I really like that. And of course, look, we have to be intrinsically motivated the number one person we don't want to disappoint should be ourselves,
Right.
because our coach is really just our support person. He's there to help us, sort of get to where we want to be. But there is something really powerful about an individual who gets the best out of you. And my college cross country coach was someone I remember from my past who occupied this spot for me. I was running because I loved the sport. I wanted to be the fastest runner I could be. Being, quote, one of the fast guys was something I always wanted. And that was my singular obsession. But at the same time, I knew my coach cared about me, wanted me to be successful, so that if I got hurt doing something stupid, and Coach B, I did a lot of stupid things when I was 20 years old, then I just was so upset that I was going to inevitably disappoint my coach. Yeah, I didn't do the morning run today. I'm sorry, coach. Or, I didn't plan my training well during summer training, and now my foot hurts and I have to take 5 days off.
Yeah.
Those kinds of issues I felt were so almost embarrassing because they were disappointing my coach, and not in an unhealthy way. I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea, but it was such a magnetic pull to do my best and to do things in a professional way. Not that I was a pro runner, but I wanted to approach it professionally. I wanted to do the right thing when it came to my training. And I think when everything else fits together, you're going to get that magnetic pull. Your coach is going to pull you in the right direction, motivate you to be your best version of yourself. And if you can find that kind of a relationship, that's where the secret sauce is. And I think that's what helps runners become their best version of themselves. Now, Coach B, I want to flip the tables a little bit and ask you, we've been talking a lot about coaches and what makes a good running coach and how we can become better coaches and all that.